Hey everybody, what's up? What's up? Just go ahead and type into the chat if you can hear me okay. I was having technical difficulties. That's why I'm a few minutes late. I was trying to get everything connected here. So just let me know if you can hear me okay. Just give me either, yeah, thumbs up, can hear me. Okay, perfect. Good, good. I'm so glad to have you guys here. Welcome, welcome. I would love to know, there's still some people kind of coming in and out. So I'd love to know while we're waiting, where are you guys joining me from today? Where are you coming at me from? I'm here in Gainesville, Virginia, which is like a little bit outside of Washington, D.C. So I'm always love hearing where you guys are joining in from. If it's across the country or where you guys are at. Utah. Hey, Kevin, how are you doing? Glad to have you guys here. All right. Oh, Dulles. All right. You're real close to me then. You're real close. I'm like, what, 20, 30 minutes from you probably? So awesome. Welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I'm just going to kind of let people in as we go. I'm probably just going to dive right into the content. And then if you guys have any questions at any point, just type them into the chat. I'll save some time at the end if you have questions on your situation. But if you just want to type them into the chat as we go, I'll kind of go back through and make sure that I'm answering either during the webinar or at the end. We'll come back to it. So can everybody see my screen okay? I've got my slides up here. Hopefully you guys can all see that all right. So if you are joining me, most of you guys I think are probably coming from social media. I've been posting a lot lately about what to do when surgery really hasn't worked. So I think a lot of you guys probably have found me through that content. So if you did, welcome. I am so, so glad that you're here. And really what I hope to give you guys today is a little bit more hope in all of this, that there's a whole lot that you can do for it. So I'm sure that some of you guys are kind of feeling stuck, maybe that you've been either feeling like I'm just bound, destined to live with this pain forever, and I am just going to have to avoid the things that I love and just not do them anymore. Or maybe I'm going to push through and just this is going to be my normal. Or you might even be feeling like surgery is the only option for me. I have to have, something changed in my hip for me to be able to move forward. And the hard part about this is that neither one of those options is really a great option for you. I mean, sometimes can surgery be helpful? Yes, absolutely. But you never want to feel forced into it and pressured into it like it's your only option. There are definitely other things that you can do for it. And again, that's sort of what I want to talk to you guys about today. Because if you're anything like my clients, this is sort of the big debate that's in your mind. I'm either stuck with this pain and I just have to live with it, or I have to have surgery. And the reality is, there's another alternative, because I do unfortunately see a lot of people who decide to, have the surgery and they still end up in pain. So what is this other alternative? What can we do instead? If you are out there and you're trying to figure out if surgery is the right next step for you, this is definitely going to be a really good place to start. It's going to hopefully give you some answers there. Maybe you're not debating surgery, but you just feel like you've tried everything for your hip. You've tried the physical therapy, you've tried the exercises, you've done all the things, and it just feels like nothing is working. You're not getting relief, or you just feel like you're very plateaued with what your progress is. We are still going to cover that today, and it hopefully will help you moving forward. Curious if any of you guys have been, given a formal diagnosis. Anybody, do you have a labral tear? Do you have impingement? Are you considering surgery? Have you already had surgery? Again, I'd love to know kind of what your situations are. So feel free to share it with me in the chat if you feel comfortable doing so. Again, I like to kind of know where people are at when they come into these. So now, what the heck makes me qualified to even be talking about this? So if you guys don't already know me, I am Dr. Jenna. I am a physical therapist. And again, I'm located here in Gainesville, Virginia. I started a small clinic called On Point Wellness and Rehab. We're actually celebrating our 10-year anniversary in May, which is absolutely crazy. And I help people get out of pain when they've been kind of dealing with this really these persistent chronic problems, whether it be impingement, labral tears, different types of chronic hip issues. That's where I specialize. So I really started this clinic as it was a dance medicine practice. So as you can imagine, the name is On Point Wellness. So I initially only saw dancers because I am a dance medicine specialist as well. And you can probably imagine that dancers have a lot of issues with their hips. And so through all of the work that I was doing with dancers, I became very well versed in this area of treating hip impingement and labral tears because it is so common in our dance population. So these days, I pretty much that's all I treat is hip issues. I don't see dancers exclusively. I see everybody with chronic hip issues. And that's kind of what I've been known for in this area is being able to help people with that issue. Now we do still see lots and lots of dancers in our clinic, but I have other therapists who are primarily doing the dance medicine side of things, and then I work with all of the other hip clients. These days, I'm also almost exclusively virtual. I have my therapists that treat here in the clinic, and then I help people online because I realized that there is such a need for this. The amount of times that people had walked into this clinic or I meet with virtually that tell me I have tried everything and nothing has worked and I feel stuck and I just don't know what to do. That is the population that I serve. And there isn't enough help out there for people who are struggling like you are. And so that's why I do treat primarily online these days because it allows me to reach so many more of you and be able to help so many more people who are struggling with this, even if you don't have access to me in your direct area. So what are we going to go through on today's webinar? We are going to talk about what the heck is even happening in your hip. I think this is a huge issue where some people you don't have an understanding of what's even going on. And so we are going to talk through what all of these big scary words mean and hopefully put it in a way that makes a bit more sense so that you know what to do moving forward. We're also going to talk about why nothing else has worked. Maybe it was surgery, but maybe it was just physical therapy or exercises. We're going to talk about why you are still feeling stuck, even if you've done all of those things. And then I'm going to walk you through the exact framework that I use with all of my clients to help them make lasting progress. We're not just talking short-term relief here. We're talking, how do I turn this into something that I can carry forward with me through life? And that is the framework that I've sort of developed and that we do with all of our clients in person, online. I'm going to give it to you guys today so that you know what to do to move forward and feel a little bit more confident on what you should be doing next. So let's talk about what's happening in your hip joint. We're going to do a little anatomy lesson here. Do not worry, there will not be a quiz on this after, so I'm going to keep it in very simple terms for you so that it's easy to understand. And actually, I am going to go ahead. I'm going to just stop my screen share if I can here. Oops, clicking the wrong thing. Oh, there we go. See these tech problems again. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share. All right, so you guys should be able to see me now. And oops, I got the wrong. Sorry, guys. This is what happens when I end up with when my IT person's not with me. Here we go. All right, so we are going to go through a little bit of anatomy here. I've got my hip model because I wanted to show you a little bit more about what's going on in the anatomy. I think it's easier to see this way. And so when we're looking at the hip joint, we've got kind of two main structures that we're looking at. We have the head of the femur, which is this bone here. It's like the ball part of the ball and socket. And then you have what's known as the acetabulum, which is the socket. And that is on the pelvis. So this makes up the hip joint. It is a ball and socket joint, which means there's lots of awesome movement in this joint. But it also means that we need good control and stability to make sure things are moving the way that it needs to move. Now, this is a pretty deep socket. Our hip joint, it sits pretty well in that socket. It's not like some of these other joints that just kind of like sit on top of each other. It's a pretty deep groove. Now, there are certain things that can happen, like if anybody's ever been diagnosed with dysplasia, that sort of means that this socket is a bit more shallow. So instead of this really good bony coverage, the socket is a little more shallow and the head of the femur doesn't sit in there quite as deep. And that can lead to some instability issues. So if you are struggling with dysplasia, that's kind of the primary difference there. Um, but there's a lot of muscle support. There's ligamentous support first, and then there's muscle on top of it that helps stabilize this joint so that everything moves the way that it needs to. In the case of hypermobility or dysplasia, there's a little bit less stability there in the ligaments and in the bony support, and it means that it relies much more heavily on our muscles to stabilize that joint, and that can create some problems of its own. So if you are out there struggling with that, please know this will also help you a lot. In fact, many of my clients that I work with also are struggling with hypermobility or EDS. So these things are very commonly occurring together. Now, the other piece that I want to talk about of anatomy is what's known as the labrum. So I did see in here, some of you guys have been diagnosed with a tear. So what that means is this socket here, this ring of cartilage inside of the acetabulum or the socket, it's known as the labrum. It is cartilage that provides cushioning and support between these two bones. This is a weight-bearing joint, so we need some of that cushiony support. And it also helps deepen the socket a little bit more and provides some extra stability into the joint. Now, what happens in the case of a labral tear is you get this little, essentially it'll wear and tear on here. You'll get either some fraying or an actual tear. And now that acts almost like as a little hangnail in there. So instead of this nice smooth movement, that labrum, that hangnail catches in there when you go to move. And that can, as you can imagine, create some of the symptoms that you might feel. So if you have a labral tear, things that you might experience or feel are a catching, a clicking, a popping, getting stuck, feelings of giving way or giving out. These are all very common symptoms with labral tears. The other thing that's really important to know is many people have labral tears and they don't know that they have labral tears because if they don't do anything that stresses the joint in that way, it never creates pain or problems. So you can have a tear and not even know it, which tells us we can also have a tear and live with it. Just because they have found a tear on your MRI does not automatically mean that you have to have surgery on it. We can live with these things. It's just about learning how do I move and coordinate the joint so that it's not causing excessive irritation in that labrum or in the joint anymore. So that's what happens when we're talking about a tear. There's also just the case of impingement, which I see some of you guys have some impingement, cam deformity, pincer deformity. You might have heard these words before or seen them on your imaging. And all of that means is that sometimes there's a little extra bony growth on either the head of the femur or on the socket. And so when we have extra bony growth, instead of getting this nice smooth movement, there's sometimes a little bit of bone that gets in the way. And when I go to flex or I go to move my joint, it creates some extra compression where we don't want it. Also very important to note, these bony structural changes are also fairly common in the general population, meaning we can look at x-rays and MRIs of a whole bunch of hips, and they do this all the time. They'll look at hundreds of hips of people that have no symptoms, and like 60 to 70% of them, they will find structural changes, labral tears, things like that. So again, and these are people that have no symptoms, right? So we know that we can live with some of these things, even structural, and it can never cause a problem. So then what does cause the problem? It's often the way that we are moving. Now, if there is bone in the way and we try to move and glide, there is the case where sometimes it's so much that you just can't do the things you love anymore. And this is where potentially surgery can be a good option. Most of the clients that I work with, I think, and what you will find is that very rarely is surgery the only option for you because most cases aren't so severe that you're never going to gain range of motion back. It's all in how you're moving. So let's talk about what that means. So, and this is sort of related to either impingement or labral tears. These things kind of go hand in hand. But when we move, essentially what is supposed to happen, the head of this femur needs to stay centered in the socket. So when I flex my hip, for example, or when I rotate my leg or my hip, the head of that femur, it needs to move and glide in the socket in a way that keeps it centered. So if I'm using the example of flexing my hip, now this might be like lifting my knee up towards my chest to put my shoe on, bending forward. These are all hip flexion movements. So what is supposed to happen in the joint is the head of this femur, and you don't feel this or see it, but inside the joint, it has to glide down and back into the socket so that it stays centered. Now, in people that have symptomatic impingement, that is generally not happening. And it can be for a variety of reasons. It can be structural. Again, most of the time it's functional. So the way that you're moving and the way the muscles are coordinating creates a lot of this problem and wrong movement patterns. And so when I go to flex my hip, instead of it staying centered, it rides a little too far forward. And it's not that it doesn't dislocate, right? It's a pretty stable socket, but the pressure, there's too much pressure forward. And so now when I flex my joint, I have all this compression on the front side. Most people with hip impingement, the symptoms that they feel are on the front portion of that joint. And it's because the head of that femur drifts a little too far forward in the socket. It creates too much compression. We get extra repetitive wear and tear on the front of that socket. And that is that classic pinch or pain that you feel right in that groin area, front of the hip joint, underwear line, kind of any of those areas. It's because there's too much compression at the front of that socket. In regards to the labrum is most exposed on the front end of that joint. And so that repetitive motion where it kind of is like hitting forward over and over and over again, that's what causes some of that fraying and tearing. So again, it can be structural where there's actually an issue where the bone isn't shaped correctly. More often than not, there's also a major functional component, meaning the muscles aren't coordinating well, and it's creating that pressure forward and that repetitive wear and tear that eventually creates either the bony impingement or a labral tear. So that's sort of what we're dealing with from the anatomy side of things. I'm going to go ahead and put my slides back up here for you guys while we move forward. But hopefully that makes sense and again puts it in a way that makes it a little bit more digestible of like what's happening. Because I think it can be really scary, especially when you get these big, there's like you get an MRI or a diagnosis and it's very medical jargony and you're like, what the heck does this even mean? FAI, like what sometimes you'll see degeneration or wear and tear. It's scary. But when we can break it down and put it into these very simple terms and just show you, it basically means the head of that socket isn't staying centered. It's creating too much compression, and you end up feeling a pinch or pain. That's really all that's happening. And that also tells us that's how we correct it, right? So at the very basis of what we need to do with all of our movement re-education, it's teaching you how do I keep the head of my femur centered in the socket and make sure that the muscles and the joint is supporting me in a way that it needs to. So if you are feeling any of these symptoms, again, these are like the common symptoms that you might feel with either a labral tear or just impingement. Dysplasia also, I would say, presents with a lot of these similar symptoms. So you're getting a pinching or a sharp pain that's often on the front side of the groin. Not always. There is also a type of posterior impingement. So many people don't feel it on the front of the joint, but they feel it on the back portion, or sort of like deep into the glutes. That's also really common. A catching sensation. So feeling like something is actually catching and getting stuck when you go to move through ranges of motion. This is a little bit more common if you have a labral tear, that catching, because again, it's like that hangnail sort of gets caught in there. Another really common one you've probably heard me talk about before is the C sign. So the C sign is basically if you make a C shape with your hand, if you can see my hip here. If I were to make a C shape with my hand and like grab around my hip and you're like, it hurts in there. People often describe it as it's like inside there. So that we call it the C sign just because that's sort of the way it's shaped. This is a really common one. I get people all the time that comment on this and they're like, oh my gosh, that is exactly what I'm feeling. And everybody thinks I'm crazy. Nobody ever has explained it in a way that makes sense, but that's exactly what I'm feeling. So If that is what you're feeling, no, you are not crazy. That is called the C sign, and it is one of the most common symptoms with impingement and labral tears. And it's almost like it's this deep pain that you can't really pinpoint, but it could be coming from inside the joint. Another really common one is this constant hip flexor tightness. Many people feel like I constantly am needing to stretch my hip flexors, yet I stretch all day and nothing changes. I could stretch for an hour and I would feel exactly the same. Or maybe it feels better for 5 minutes, but then I start moving again and it tenses right back up. We're going to talk about why that is in a little bit, but that is a very common symptom here. The other thing too is other body areas. It may not be just in your hip. Maybe it's your lower back, your SI joint, your knee, your adductors, and your groin. Like all of these places are really common to feel pain alongside of the hip issue. Usually it's coming from compensation. And it's connected. A lot of times I think people come in and they're like, oh, I have back pain, but it's not related. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably related because compensation does some crazy things. Pelvic floor symptoms are also very common here. Our pelvic floor and our hip stabilizers are really the same muscle. They're sort of one and the same. And some of them cross over. So when we're dealing with a hip issue, we are also dealing with the pelvic floor. We can't separate these things out. And so sometimes people will have pelvic floor symptoms such as urinary leaking or incontinence. It might feel like a pressure or a heaviness or a bulging sensation. It might mean pain with intercourse. It could be difficulty if you're a female putting a tampon on or tampon in or keeping a tampon in during the day. Difficulty with lifting something heavy or exerting pressure, like with a cough or a sneeze. All of these things are very common to feel right alongside the hip. And I would bet that they are, if you are experiencing any of these, they are very much so related to what is going on. And when you're looking at treating them, we have to look at the whole picture. We can't just look at bits and pieces. We have to look at this very holistically. And all of these things are capable of also improving, which is why we want to make sure that we are paying attention. So, what do you do for this? Because again, the most common thing that I hear from people, the most common problem is I have tried absolutely everything that I can think of and it is not working. What the heck am I supposed to do? And what I want to make sure that you guys understand is that if that is you, first of all, you are not alone in it. Second of all, it's not your fault. It's not that you've done something wrong. It's just that nobody has shown you a good system moving forward. And more importantly, they haven't taught you how is it that you need to think about your hip. Understanding your hip is going to be one of the most important things to carry you forward. So what does that mean? You need to understand what is it that triggers your symptoms? What causes your pain? What calms it back down? What makes me feel better? And then understanding what are the movement patterns that my body is doing and how can I improve them to try to create less compression, less stress, less pain in the joint so that I can eventually do all the things that I want to do without problems. Most of the time, nobody has ever walked you through how to do any of those things. And so what ends up happening is basically I keep doing the exercises that the PT has given me, but you're basically not correcting the root of what's going on. And you're really just layering it all on top of, whether it's dysfunctional movement patterns or muscle imbalances. And so you end up strengthening the wrong things. And so having a better understanding of how to find and understand what's going on there is what ultimately is going to move you forward so that you're not stuck anymore. And that means you need to have a strategy for how to do it. It's not just trying harder and trying more things. It's because you just don't have a strategy. So the problem where people end up getting stuck is they are strengthening on top of movement patterns that aren't correct. So you're strengthening, you're getting stronger, but you're strengthening the wrong stuff. Nobody has ever showed you what muscle is supposed to be firing and when is it supposed to be firing. Unfortunately, a lot of times you go to PT, they give you a laundry list of exercises and you do the exercises, but nobody ever told you how to do said exercises. That is going to create a problem. The other problem is if you're ignoring your nervous system. Our nervous system has a really big impact on what is going on in our hip and the tension patterns that we hold. So we have to make sure that we're paying attention to that system in order to finally break through and get over this hump and this cycle that you've been stuck in. And then again, it's guessing instead of having a clear path forward. How many times do you go into physical therapy and they give you the list of what to do, but nobody has ever explained why you're doing it, or where you're going with all of it. How does this clamshell exercise tie into the fact that I want to run a marathon? Whatever it is. There needs to be a strategy behind it. And many times the PT may have a strategy, but if they're not sharing it with you, that is going to create a huge gap and you're going to feel very stuck for a while. Let's pull surgery in for a second, because I also think this is a really important place to note that while surgery will fix structure, it can fix up that labral tear that's in there, whether they shave it out or they do a repair. They shave down the bone, so they take away that cam or that pincer deformity. That's all well and good. But the problem is, nowhere in surgery does it teach you how to fix your movement patterns. And again, that is going to keep you stuck if you don't know that going in. I think many surgeons are great about explaining this, but not all. So I want to make sure that if you are considering surgery, you understand that going in, that we can fix the structure, but it doesn't take away the need for you to do all of these things in this framework that we're going to talk about today. You still have to learn how to move with good patterns and what to do if your hip flares up, because it may after surgery. Learning sort of the triggers, what eases your symptoms, like what's flaring it, all of these things. This is information that you will have forever. So whether it's this hip issue or hopefully someday you're not having pain here anymore and it happens somewhere else in your body, this framework, the cool part about it is you can apply this into anything that you do moving forward. So that's why I am so adamant on educating people what's going on in their body versus just giving this plug and play exercise routine. I don't believe that that is the best way to help somebody out of this situation, or any situation for that matter. You've got to understand your body. And I want you to understand your body better than a new clinician coming out of school would, because at the end of the day, you are the one in control, not somebody else. So again, the biggest thing that I see that's missing for people is this process and knowing what to do and when to focus on it. So let me talk to you about the framework that I use with my clients. And this is where I think this is going to help you so much know where is it that I need to go with my rehab or my exercises, or like, what the heck do I do next? Having this framework, I'm going to share it with you. It is the same framework that I use across the board, however I work with people, whether they are in the clinic getting hands-on care, they're doing virtual coaching with me, or even in my self-paced programs. We walk through this framework. And I do believe that over the past 13 plus years of me doing this, this is the reason that my clients get lasting changes where they may not from the PT place down the road. So what is this framework? I call it the core framework. The C stands for calm and understanding your hip. The O is optimizing movement. The R is rebuilding strength, and the E is elevating performance. Now, when we walk through these, we're going to talk a little bit about each of these phases. Please know that it doesn't necessarily correlate to a specific timeline. These phases are sort of the framework of what you want to work through. They're the skeleton of what you're going to work through. It doesn't necessarily mean I spend 1 week in phase 1 or 3 weeks in phase 1. Every body moves at a different pace, and that is okay. The more important thing is taking this framework and being able to apply it into your situation. But if you follow these steps, it will get you out of pain long term. And also, this is whether you have surgery or don't have surgery. Surgery doesn't take away the need for working through this strategy. It just depends. Do we do this before you have surgery? Do we do it after you have surgery? Like, that might change a little bit, but no matter what, framework stays the same. So let's walk through it. Phase 1 is calming and understanding your pain. You already heard me mention that I think it is extremely important for people to understand what is happening in their body. And I think, really, if anything, the understanding part is almost like phase zero. I lump it into phase one because we're doing it like within the first few sessions of working with somebody. But things that you're trying to figure out here are, what does your body respond? What is your hip responding to? What flares it? What are your consistent triggers? And what consistently makes it feel better? Now, in the beginning, you will probably feel like, I have absolutely no idea. My pain is completely random. I have absolutely no idea what triggers it, what makes it better. I wake up one day, it's fine. I wake up the next day, it's like totally flared up. Here's what I can tell you about that. There is always a pattern. It is never random. You just haven't found the pattern yet. And more importantly, you probably haven't had somebody that's taught you how to even find said pattern. But there's always a pattern there. Sometimes it's that a certain movement that will trigger it. Maybe it's hip flexion. So like bending over to put the shoes on, squatting down to get in a chair, going upstairs. These are all flexion based activities. So maybe we can then figure out, okay, anytime my knee comes closer to my chest, that's what's triggering my symptoms. So that's what we need to work on. Sometimes it's a tension based pattern. Sometimes it's that I am holding too much tension in the muscles around my joint. Maybe it's a protective thing. Maybe it's habit. Just my neuromuscular system is doing crazy things, but it's holding all this tension, and that is giving me a flare up. Maybe I feel it more in times of stress. So there's a lot of different possibilities here. What's more important is understanding what is your own pattern. And there's a couple different ways that I teach people how to track this. The easiest way that you can do it is to pop a note open in your phone and just write down a few bullet points every single day at the end of the day. What did you do today? How did your hip feel? Did it make it better? Did it make it worse? Was there anything you did that made it better? What did I do that made it worse? Quick little things, because you probably won't notice the pattern after 3 days, but you will start to notice a pattern after a week or two of doing this. And that also becomes really valuable information for going in to see your doctor or your physical therapist. You can pop it open and be like, okay, here's what I've noticed, versus when they ask you, tell me about your hip pain and when does it hurt? And you're like, well, I think it hurts this way. And then maybe I did this one time and it hurt. It's really hard to remember and call on that information on the spot. So even just if you are working with a PT, having this information logged is so invaluable. So that's kind of like the understanding part of it, which really leads us into, how do we calm the pain? Because once I understand my joint, I can now figure out, what do I need to do more of to make it feel better? And what do I need to do less of, because that's what makes it hurt? And so we're trying to figure out, how can we calm the system in a way that my body responds well to, and I'm actually seeing that pain start to lessen, or that tension or pinching or whatever symptom it is that you're feeling, I'm actually starting to see it move in the right direction. Keep in mind, the goal here is not solely to eliminate your symptoms and your pain. It's trying to calm the entire system down. When you're feeling pain, especially if you've been feeling pain for a long period of time, our body, it holds on to a lot of that, right? It grips, it tenses, it's protecting. It's on high alert. You basically are living in this fight or flight status. And you have to calm your nervous system down in order to be able to even do the next step in this framework. If we jump ahead and you just start strengthening on a body that's very reactive and is, again, in that fight or flight, and it's tensing and guarding every time you try to load it or move a certain way, you're going to be stuck. The strength is not going to mean anything for you. We have to make sure we calm the system first so that we can actually move it forward. And this can be really hard for people because they're like, well, I don't want to slow down. And notice I'm not saying I want you to completely rest here. We're not taking you out of every activity and stopping everything. We're just figuring out, what is it that your body needs to calm it? Maybe it is that I'm not going to run for a little while, but can we swap that with something else? Can we bike instead? Could we take daily walks? Could we do some yoga instead of some heavy weight training? Could we do some weight training, but maybe focus more on the form versus on adding weight? There's so many different ways that you can modify. I'm big on not fully stopping and resting, but no matter what, you have to stop the triggering activity. You do have to figure out, how do I reduce the amount of defensiveness that's going on in my system so that I can actually not be so afraid of movement anymore, and I can move into these next phases. So as we move into phase two, keep in mind, as we are transitioning from one phase to the next, these are not absolutes, right? There's a lot of crossover. So many times we're still calming a bit as we move into phase two and as we move beyond. There's a lot of like overlapping. Sometimes you move a little forward, sometimes you move a little back, but this is kind of just the process that you would want to go through. So as we move into phase two, this is where we're going to start optimizing movement. This is where hopefully your system is more in a bit more of a calmed state. And so now we're going to try to teach your joint, how do I move in a way that reduces the amount of stress that's going on in my joint and actually makes things feel better instead of worse. Because as I mentioned, very often movement patterns are the problem or the reason that you get yourself into this problem and the reason that you get stuck. And so if you keep moving that way, it's just going to keep feeding into that problem. So we do have to retrain movement and make sure that things are happening the way that we need to. So this is proper muscle sequencing, knowing what muscle to move and when to move it. Maybe it's just building awareness over the muscles in general. When we were talking about anatomy, we talked a lot about making sure like the head of the femur has to stay centered in the socket as I move and glide. And so that's what a lot of this phase is spent doing, is how do I make all the muscles around that joint help keep the head of the femur centered in the socket so that when I do flex, I don't get that forward movement at the head of the femur and I get that pinching or catching sensation. So what can I do that actually allows the head of my femur to stay moving in an optimal pattern? And guys, this is absolutely crucial and key to be able to move into the next phase, which will be strengthening. Because if we start strengthening before we've learned how to move, basically what you're doing is you're reinforcing the dysfunctional pattern. You're reinforcing the problem. So we must fix the patterns first. You must understand what you're using and why you're using it. And then we can move into that next phase, which is strengthening. Without a doubt, I would say this right here, phase one as well, but really phase two is often the most overlooked step in all physical therapy. The physical therapists tend to not teach how you're supposed to do an exercise. You've got the list, you've got the paper, but nobody's really ever shown you, hey, when you do that clamshell, what muscle, where do you feel it? And how are you supposed to engage it properly? And that is key. And it is my favorite thing to talk about with people because it makes such a difference moving forward. So once we've built these really good patterns, or at least you've built it in a way where you're not having to think so hard about it, you're needing a little less guidance, and things are feeling, from a pain perspective, they're feeling much better. Maybe it's a little bit there, but it's not so constant anymore. Now we start loading the joint. We've already laid the foundation of calmer system, better movement patterns. Now we must load it. Now, I think there's sort of two mistakes that I see here. What I put here is that a lot of times people start strength too early, or it's very generic strength without laying those foundations. One of the other problems, though, that I see with my people who have had chronic hip pain is that they are almost too afraid to start strength training. So maybe you're the person that's like, I'm going to push, I'm going to strengthen, and I kind of just fight through the pain, and it doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep strengthening. I've done it a little early in the grand scheme of things. My body's not really ready for it, but whatever. I want to get stronger, and that's that. And that obviously is going to keep you stuck in pain. But then on the other side of the equation, I have people who we've done that work with. We've laid the groundwork. They're doing great, but they finally are not feeling pain. And so they are terrified to add load and resistance and start moving heavier, or more repetition or more intense, whatever that might look like. That creates just as much of a problem. In our body, we must, to see changes, we must use progressive overload. And this is a strength and conditioning concept where essentially, in order to see strength gains, we must overload the muscle in a way that it actually adapts and changes. And if we never challenge that muscle, it doesn't adapt and change, and it just plateaus or stays the same. And that is a huge problem. So again, if we've calmed the symptoms and we've built really good movement patterns, we must then move into how do I strengthen those patterns? Because that's what's going to make them stick. And now we're also building strength that means something. We're building strength that's actually moving you forward, and it's teaching that joint, how do I stabilize properly? How do I make sure that I'm protecting that joint space and I'm hopefully strengthening where I don't need surgery anymore, or I strengthen prior to surgery so that after surgery my recovery is much smoother. If you've already had surgery, you know you need to build strength after, but we don't dive straight into strength. We do these other things first, but then at a certain point, you're ready to get back to the bigger things, the goals that you have. Without strength, you're never going to get there. So it is really important that we bring this phase in. And this is the fun phase, guys. This is when it starts to feel like, oh, I'm not doing rehab anymore. I'm just getting stronger. But I'm actually getting stronger in a way that makes sense and my body is responding well to. So then what next? Because I do think, even if you've walked through this process, one of the other really big mistakes is that then people stop. I'm not having pain anymore. I'm doing my exercises. I'm feeling stronger and I'm done. And that's going to create a bigger issue that you have only taken yourself to pain relief, but you haven't built long-term resilience in your body. And so when you stop doing all the things that worked up to this point, the pain often returns. Maybe not right away, but a couple months from now, a year later from now, problems start to re-arise. And so what we have to do is we have to take all of that foundation that you built prior to this, and you have to turn it into something that works for you and your goals and kind of is ready to take on the demands of everyday life. We're not looking for quick fixes here. We are looking for long-term changes. And so we can't stop at pain relief, because if we stop at pain relief, that's a quick fix. We have to learn, how do I handle life again? And how do I handle the bigger, more intense movements that I'm wanting to do, whatever that goal is for you. And so this is where phase 4 comes in. It's maintaining everything you've done up to this point and then progressing even beyond that. The other thing that I'm really focusing on in this phase with my clients, so again, at this point, they're probably, they're pain-free, they're feeling strong, they're feeling pretty independent again. And so something is really important here is making sure that they have a plan of what to do if something goes wrong. Because the reality is, guys, very likely there's going to be some flare-ups that happen, right? I talk about this framework and it gives this illusion that pain is going to be, or recovery is going to be this beautiful upward trend and everything's going to get better, better, better till it's gone. The reality is that is not what happens. It is very much an up and down process that is normal. It is to be expected. Even when you get to this final phase and everything's been feeling good for the past 3 months, there's always that chance that there's going to be a flare up again, right? So here's what's really cool. When you've laid this foundation and you understand your body, you've essentially built a flare-up plan or a recovery plan of what do I do if things start to go wrong again. I start to feel my hip wanting to flare. I feel some of those old feelings that I used to feel. What do I do? Oh, I'm going to go back to what I learned 3 months ago that got me out of pain in the first place. And that's yours forever. You've built this plan of what do I do? How do I go back to basics, recalm my symptoms back down, correct any and fine tune any movement patterns that maybe aren't going so well, put my strength back in action, and I'll be back better than ever in no time. By this point, the flare up that you have should be much shorter lived, right? Like as you go through this process, the flare ups get less and less and shorter and shorter. So eventually it turns into, I'm starting to feel something, but I know what to do. I'm going to immediately go back to what Jenna told me and what I learned about my hip. And I do that, and my flare up, it never actually turns into a flare up. It just feels like, it was a little uncomfortable. But what I hear from a lot of my clients are, it used to last me 3 weeks in a flare up, and it took me 3 days or 3 hours to get out of it this time. And that is the difference in knowing and understanding your body and having a framework that you can follow. It gives you something to do and know what to do for the future. So I'm curious, out of you guys that are listening, where do you feel like you are stuck? Is this framework something that anybody has ever introduced to you before, or something similar to this? And even if they haven't, where do you feel like you're getting stuck? Do you feel like nobody's ever even taught you the awareness piece and you're at a zero? Do you feel like you've calmed your symptoms, but you keep getting stuck at not being able to get stronger? Are you stuck in that phase 2, 3? Like, where are you? Because once you know where you fall on this scale and where you're getting stuck, now we have a starting point of what do we need to do to get you out of it? What do we do next to get you out of it? Why are you getting stuck? And when we can identify that, that is what is ultimately going to start moving you guys in the right pattern or the right path. And what is that next step? What should it look like? Let's talk about that, because I have something that I think will really help you guys. I think if you've been listening through this presentation, you probably are figuring out, okay, if I'm stuck, here's why I might be stuck, right? Knowing it, understanding it, being aware of it, that's amazing, definitely important. But how do you apply it? How do you actually take all this information, apply it into your situation, and make sure that it works for your body? That's a little bit different. And that is where somebody who is skilled in this and specializes in this, that's where all the difference is going to be. So in order for you guys to be able to move forward, no matter who you work with or what you do in the future, you need to understand what is kind of where's my sticking point? Where am I getting stuck? And what is the plan to get out of it? How am I going to figure out how to get myself unstuck and break that cycle? It needs to be a clear plan. It needs to be strategic. It needs to be progressive. You also need to know, how do I adjust as my body changes? Because as I mentioned, it's not this beautiful upward trend of it's better, 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 gone, solved. It's very up and down. So when it goes up and down, how do I adjust based on what my body needs? And this, again, is where you need somebody who can kind of teach you, what do I do in those moments? So that, again, once you learn it once, you've got it for the future. You also need to be able to learn and understand what's going on in my body beyond just like rehab exercises. What do I need to do to implement this into life moving forward? Not just with these little rehab exercises, but like, how do I turn this into an exercise program? How do I turn this into a return to run program? Or again, whatever these bigger goals that you have to know, how do I get from doing a squat to running the marathon? There's a lot in between there. And so having that guidance of how do I put this into a plan that works for me is really important. And guys, I think the other really important thing here too is you just need to find hope again. I think that too often when you're struggling with this type of issue, especially if you've been struggling for a long time, you start to lose a little bit of hope. You start to lose a little bit of identity in yourself. You used to identify as the active one. You used to feel like, I could do anything. And now you start to question that a little bit because every step is a little uncertain. Everything hurts a little bit more. Maybe you stop hanging out with the people who, you used to hang out with because you can't run anymore. Whatever it is, it chips away at your sense of identity and your sense of hope. And you just start to feel like this is just going to be my new normal. And what I want to make sure that you guys understand is there's a whole lot of hope out there. You have to try whatever program or plan or how you try to get yourself out of this situation. You have to do something that helps you find that hope again and find that sense of self. I don't ever want this process to be something that you feel like you have to guess your way through, right? Especially if you are debating surgery. This is not something that like, well, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do this. You need a very clear plan. You need not ChatGPT at 2 a.m. because you're spiraling and you think that you've made it worse and you've undone all your progress. You need a plan for your body that works. You need somebody that will walk alongside of you in all of this and make sure that you have that next step. And where's my body right now? And where am I going with everything? So, is this even possible? Because you're probably listening to me thinking, there's no way. Like, I've been stuck. There's no way that any of this, like, that I could feel that way again, that I can get my hope back or get my sense of identity back or do these big things that I want to do. Maybe it is just daily life things, right? But what I can tell you is it's real. So these are some of the clients that I've worked with, and I wanted to share their stories with you. These are just a couple of the stories of people that have had some really big changes because I want you to realize that there is a lot of hope out there. So Stephanie is one of my clients. I'm not working with her anymore because she is doing fabulous. But this is what she had wrote to me. She said since September, she had been in PT with a labral tear, and there was some improvement, but there was still problems with walking and basic daily activities. And she participated in my self-paced program called the Hip Lab. And within just 3 weeks into the program, she was having zero pain. Now, of course, we know that sometimes we have those quick changes, zero pain relief, right 3 weeks in. That is an amazing result. But she was able to take that and turn it into something so much more because I don't have this written in here, but she still is not having any pain anymore. She just needed to get herself out of kind of over that initial hump of feeling pain. But then she kept putting in the work and getting stronger and doing the things that she couldn't do before because she couldn't load her joint. She couldn't get stronger. But 3 weeks in, no more pain. Guess what? She got to move forward pretty quickly. She just needed to get herself out of that place. You know, this was somebody who also too was thinking surgery was her only option and quickly realized that quickly, within 3 weeks, realized that that was not going to be the case. So I have another client, Kate, and she is somebody that I work with in the clinic. So it's a little different. She is in person with me. And I actually have an update on her since when I wrote this, because initially at this time, she had told me that her pain wasn't completely gone, but she understood what was actually happening in her hip. And it was the first time that anybody had ever explained it to her in a way that made sense, and made sense in a way that she knew exactly what she needed to do when she started feeling certain things in her body. What I can tell you about Kate is we are almost completely done working together because she is doing fabulous. She ran 6 miles. She told me, I saw her this morning. She ran 6 miles this weekend, you guys. She couldn't even run 1 mile when we started 10 weeks ago. She ran 6 miles with zero pain, zero symptoms. She is one of my dancers. She is kicking her leg high, no problems. Still, we're still working on strength, but her symptoms are finally gone and she is actually making progress forward and knows what to do in her body. Anne was one of my other clients who I've worked with virtually. When we started, she could not even do a squat, which meant things like getting up and down from the ground were really challenging. Getting up and down from a chair was really challenging. And this was particularly difficult for her because she's a teacher. And so she couldn't get up and down on the ground with her students. And she is able to do multiple rounds of squats, zero pain, full range of motion. She's getting up and down on the ground from her kids. It doesn't need to be these really big goals of running a marathon or running 6 miles or dancing and performing again. Sometimes it's just, I want to be able to get up and down from the ground. And what's really cool is that she was able to do this and avoid the injection. She canceled her injection because she's been feeling so good. So these are real stories. This is real possibility. I want you guys to know that surgery and injections and, all of these bigger things, they're not the only solutions out there. You just need somebody that's going to teach you the strategy moving forward. So I want to give you a bit of a solution here. How do you get these same results? And there's a few different ways that you can do it, but what I wanted to share with you guys today is something called the Hip Lab. This is a self-paced course that I created that walks you through these exact 4 phases that I just talked to you about in today's presentation. It walks you through this step by step. It gives you checkpoints for when do I move into the next phase? Where should I be at? What should I be feeling? And it walks you through the process on your own time. No appointments needed. Time, the time commitment is low. The financial commitment is low. It just gives you the framework that you need to implement it and move forward. This is where you start to understand your hip and understand, how do I feel more in control of what is happening in my body? If you guys are interested in joining, here is all the information. There's a QR code up there. You can scan that. It should take you right to the page to sign up. Today it is $349. It gives you lifetime access. So you get the 4-phase framework. It's basically access to videos so you can watch them on your own time. It gives you checkpoints of how to walk through those processes and how to adapt it to your body in a way that works. It is not a plug and play exercise routine. There are exercise suggestions within it, but most importantly, it is teaching you, how do I understand what is happening in my body and apply these concepts into whatever it is that I want to do moving forward. So because of that, you also get lifetime access, so you can revisit the content at any point, any time that you need to. The other thing that I'm going to do for you guys today, if you join while we were still on the call, you will get a bonus. I guess you can't see it there. My body's probably in the way. You get a free 20-minute one-on-one call with me. So this is normally $200 and I'm giving it to you guys absolutely free if you join, and the program is only $349. So huge value there. This is where we can talk about your specific situation, and we can make sure that if anything needs to be tailored to your body and what's going on, this is where we can do it. You can ask me whatever questions that you have and I will help you that way. So today is your chance to grab that. Once we are done with the webinar, that goes away. So you are bonus. If you guys are on live with me, you'll get access to that today if you join. One other thing that I just want to mention to you as well, if you're feeling like, okay, I love this idea of the Hip Lab, but I have to implement that on my own. And yes, you do. It gives you the framework, but you are ultimately responsible for implementing on your own. Move myself up here. There is another option. So I have a group coaching program. The recent group just started up, which means this is not going to be starting until probably June or July. However, I did feel like I wanted to let you guys know, because not everybody wants a self-paced program. You want to work with me directly. And so this is a really great option, and you can join the waitlist now. So what is the Hip Lab VIP? This is where you get access to the Hip Lab, but we walk through it together. So it's basically the exact same thing as working with me one-on-one, only less of a time commitment, less of a financial commitment, and you still get all the same stuff. You get weekly group coaching calls, which honestly is even more powerful because you get to connect with other people in the community. These groups are kept small on purpose. They are only up to 8 people maximum, so that you get personalized individual attention and you can connect with the other group members, because it can be a little lonely. So knowing what other people are going through and being able to connect with them is huge. So you obviously will have access to that full framework, but the biggest difference is, what do I do? How do I walk myself through this? This is where you'll get a little bit more guidance, and you'll have that support the entire time that you walk through it. This program is formulated as an 8-week program. So we work together directly for 8 weeks. It is not open right now, but if you join the wait list, I'm only opening the wait list to people who are doing a webinar. So, and there's only 5 to 8 spots available. So if you think that you might be interested in this as summer rolls around, go ahead and add yourself to that wait list. There's no commitment here. So the worst that's going to happen is you say, no, I don't want my spot, when it is time for it to open up. But be sure to put yourself on that wait list if you think you might be interested, because wait list obviously gets priority at booking. All right, so let's talk questions. I want to see if I think I saw some questions or comments in the chat, so we'll go through questions. You guys can feel free to ask me things. I'm also going to put this back up here as well. So I'm going to move this over so you can get the QR code if you need it. If you are ready to join in on the Hip Lab, there's your QR code. You can sign up now. All right, let's see what we've got. So Jules said, I have a labral tear with FAI and a cam deformity. Okay, cool. So hopefully we talked about that and it makes a little bit more sense to you of like what's going on. Kevin, left hip torn labrum. PT hasn't worked. Also told I have a Trendelenburg on my left side. Yeah, so Trendelenburg, that's like where your hip sort of drops down. This is really common. It's one of the biggest triggers that I see with people that have impingement and tears. And it's because of the position that it puts your pelvis in. It creates extra compression on the front side of that joint. You guys can see if I put this up here. There we go. Okay. So when I move into, hopefully you can see this. I don't know if it'll work. When I move into a Trendelenburg, it kind of creates this like downward motion. My hip tips and I get compression, like closes the space off on the front side of that joint, basically. So you're more likely to get that compressed feeling. This probably works better. You can probably see it a little better with my hands. But that's a really common pattern. You know, everybody moves in different ways, but people with impingement, there are some really common patterns that we see, and that is for sure one of them. What do you do to get out of it? You usually want to work on a lot of hip and pelvic stability things. Eventually, we work a lot on single leg movements because the Trendelenburg happens mostly in a single leg position. But we start with bilateral stability, muscle control, movement patterns, and then we transition it over to single leg because that's where you're really have to learn that control. That's sort of how you can address that. Let's see. I'm stuck because sitting is what causes my flare-ups, especially in the car, and I can't avoid sitting. Yes, this is huge. I didn't talk too much about the like specific movements that people will complain about. But sitting in the car specifically is one of the biggest triggers. And there's a couple of reasons. People also complain about it, like sitting on the couch is another big time. So if you think about the position of a car seat, sort of like that bucket seat, and it sort of like forces you into a little bit of a posterior tilt. You're kind of slouched back down into that seat, and it can create a lot of compression and irritation on the front side of the joint. When you sit with your knees really flexed up, you're in a lot of hip flexion, which is usually the irritating position. So, can you avoid sitting? No. You definitely still have to sit. So, we don't always want to, when I say like sometimes, we avoid the triggers, we don't have to entirely avoid them. What we want to do is we want to try to modify around them. So, are there little things that you can adapt or modify? So, something as simple as taking a towel roll and rolling it and putting it behind your back, which will pull your pelvis into a little bit more of a anterior tilt and take some of the stress, take you out of some of that, like that deep hip flexion. Sometimes that can be really help comfort it a little bit more. Taking more frequent breaks. So if you're sitting for work, having a sit to stand desk, or even just reminding yourself to stand up every 20 to 30 minutes is really helpful. And doing some things in other positions. Sitting up on a stool at home, like if you work from home, I tell a lot of people, can you sit on a higher surface, like a stool, for a little while so that your hip isn't so flexed all the time and you don't spend such long periods of time in that compressed position? That can be really helpful. So sometimes it's just about modifying how you're doing these things. I think the other thing that you want to pay attention to here, as well as it's not just always avoiding the painful movement because we can't, right? Like we have to sit, we have to squat, we have to bend over. So what can I do instead? Can I figure out 2 to 3 exercises that calm my symptoms? So yes, I have to sit, but if I do these 2 or 3 exercises after I sit or before I sit, does it help me get through the sitting without having such big pain spikes? That is really what we are trying to do, especially in that phase one. It's not always avoiding the movement. It's what can I do alongside the movement to lessen the pain that I'm feeling. And so in that phase one, it is a lot about, and you'll see it in the hip lab, it is a lot about learning what can I do to calm my symptoms, possibly things like breathing, finding some gentle movement again in the joint, some range of motion in a pain-free zone. There's lots of different things that we can try. So that's also what we want to try to focus on. I also see I'm least symptomatic with movement. Okay, perfect. As long as it isn't extreme positions and high impact. Yeah. Yeah. I think the length of time that you spend in a position is often what the problem is. Many of my clients say exactly the same thing. They're like, it's fitting. If I'm up, I'm moving, I'm walking. Walking is better than standing. So that's actually quite common. And it usually is just because the joint stiffens a little bit more into that position when you're immobile. So we still want to teach you good movement patterns, right? We still want to make sure that you're moving and you're stabilizing in a way that is efficient for your body. But then we want to make sure we're gearing it towards how are we actually getting pain relief out of it at the same time. So, the starting point, again, what I would say is you learn what are the 2 or 3 things that calm my pain, and I can do that consistently throughout the day. And that kind of over the course of a week or two start to lower my pain so that now when I do sit a little extra long, I know what to do to get out of pain, or it maybe just makes the sitting not so uncomfortable. One of the things that I didn't mention, if you guys do join the Hip Lab, one of the bonuses, there's actually two bonuses that you get. You'll see if you scan that QR code. One of the bonuses that you get is you will get access to the Hip Playbook app. The Hip Playbook app is how I have my clients track and journal their symptoms and their daily log. So I mentioned one of the things you want to do to understand your hip is to have an idea of what is going on, what's triggering it, what's making it feel better. This access to the Hip Playbook is going to basically every day you will log into the app and you get to log your symptoms. Very quick, very easy. So it's kind of all pre-formulated, so you don't have to do it in a note in your phone. And what it actually does is it takes that data and it generates and it kind of analyzes it all and generates a playbook for you. And that playbook is a few things to try as your hip feels flared. So it identifies what's your flare up pattern. What are the things that are seeming to consistently flare you up? And then, most importantly, what should I do for my body based on my flare up pattern to get my pain to calm down and my symptoms to calm down? So this app is so cool. It is exactly what I do with my clients. Like verbally, we sort of do it back and forth, but now you get access to be able to do it. It's like having me in your back pocket, and it takes all that data, analyzes it much as I would do sitting in front of you, and it tells you what to do. And it gives you here's some exercises to try. Here is some, some other movements or things that will be really helpful. And now, instead of spiraling when you start to feel a little bit of a flare up and going on to Google and Chat GPT, you just get to pop that app open, go to your playbook, and it's going to tell you what to do with a plan that is custom for your body. It's only, again, you guys get it completely free. The way that we had done this before was it was the 21-day challenge. So it was $25 if anybody wanted access to this app. You guys get it as a bonus when you join the Hip Lab. It is just automatically included. So that is a really cool perk of joining. And then the other thing that you get is a bonus Zoom call. So again, if you join on the call while we're together, you get a one-on-one call, a bonus 20-minute one-on-one call. But anybody who joins, even after this, you will get access to, I have a monthly group call that happens on the first Tuesday of every month. And this is where you can jump in, you can ask me questions, let me know any problems you've been having, clarify any information. And so you get access to 2 months of those calls for free when you join. So lots of extra bonuses that you get as part of this, and it only costs you $349. So I can tell you that is cheaper than a one-on-one session with me, and you get basically lifetime access to this and all 4 phases. So if you work with me fully one-on-one, it about is over the course of 3 months, it's $2,700. You guys get access to this for $349. So it's pretty cool. We've had great results with people who have gone through the program, and I know that you will get them as well. So with that being said, does anybody else have any other questions? I don't see anything else in the chat. Feel free to pop them in there. If you do have any questions, this will be sent as a replay. So if you want to watch back on anything, feel free to just check your emails after this, and I will send the replay out to you guys. If you ever need anything, if you ever need any extra support, send me an email. Let me know. I love talking this stuff out with people and helping you. I basically want to be able to guide you in what these next steps should be. So thank you guys for joining me. I look forward to connecting with you soon, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye, guys.